Hello everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Matt and this is Code Journey. Today we are going to be progressing in the Programming Fundamentals series. We will be building our first programs, start working with the if and else statement, variables and some functions and procedures. These are key programming concepts to build any system, so stay with me and follow along coding in Visual Studio. If you don't have Visual Studio installed, you can click on the video that will appear here or down below in the description. There is a full tutorial I made the other day, so you can follow along, download, install and configure Visual Studio to keep this working. Let's get started. We are going to run Visual Studio 2019 and create a new project, select console app net core, and for this project I will call this Conditionals, Functions and Procedures, because those are the topics we are going to cover. Let's click create and wait a couple of seconds until we get our solution running. So I have a summary of the topics I want to cover. All the code will be on a link below in the description. It will point to a .NET Fiddle, that is an online tool that will allow you to run everything and comment out or in if you don't have Visual Studio, and if you already have it installed, you can just copy the code from there and put it in your own project. Having that said, I will really recommend that you follow along. It is much better for learning if you code right as you see and as I speak, rather than just watching and then try to reproduce. The first topic is intro console usage. For that we are going to use only two functions for today. Those will be two methods, writeLine and readLine. writeLine will output into the console whatever we put inside those braces, and readLine will read an input from the user and return it, and we can store it in a variable, for example. So if we do something like this, we will retrieve whatever the user inputs. So if we run this program, the first thing we see is console writeLine hello world. That is what gets output into the console, and then the programs stop, right? Because it is waiting for the user to input something. If we put, for example, hello, I don't know, hello Matt, that will be put inside our variable input. Remember, variables have a type, a name, and a value. That is what we are assigning from the console readLine. That is what we wrote in here. Let's just leave this in here so our program does not stop, and then I will be commenting out and moving along the summary. So the first real thing that we want to try is printing out variables. You have to start getting comfortable playing with variables on the console, so let's do a couple of examples for that. If I want to create a variable that says string my name and put a value there of a string, and then I can do console writeLine and put my name, that is the name of the variable. Okay, if I run this, what we get in our console is Matt. Okay, nothing fancy, nothing weird. We just create a variable that says my name, put a value of Matt, and then use the console writeLine method to output the variable value, that is Matt. I hope that makes sense. If you have any question, feel free to comment below or ask me on Twitter. So let's comment out. To comment out quickly, you can do Ctrl-K plus Ctrl-C, and that comments whatever you have selected. Let's now do a sum, compute the sum of two inputs. Okay, in here we have a little inconvenience that we have to sort out, but we will get there. So let's imagine that we want to read values. We already saw how to read a string, right? But let's check it. That would be good, so you get an idea of what happens in here. If I do this, we can set a breakpoint and see what the user inputs, right? We can put another one in the next one and input hello, and our variable will have the value hello. The problem with readLine is that it returns a string. Okay, that is a sequence of characters. But we want to work with numbers, because we want to compute the sum of two inputs. To convert this, the way we are going to be doing it is Convert.ToInt 32, that is a function that will receive the value from the console read line and return an integer. And now we can do number 1, and we will get whatever the user inputs through the console. The program will try to convert it to a number and then put it inside our variable. Okay? If the user inputs something that is not a number, that will trigger an error, but for now let's not worry about that. And we want to do the same for a second number, right? Because we want to get two numbers and then compute the sum of them. There is a minor problem. If we do this, the program just stops and we don't know really what's happening, we as a user. I mean, we know because we just programmed the code, but if you show this program to, I don't know, a friend or a family member, they will just see the console and wouldn't know what to do. So let's give them instructions, right? We can do that by just putting a console write line above and say enter two numbers to get the sum. So now we have clear instructions. Oh, this is good. That's why I like coding live, so we get to see this kind of things, because this is going to happen to you. I just was typing very fast and forgot to add the semicolon in here, see? And the compiler says it is expecting this character. So we can add it, and now everything compiles and it works. So we run it, and now the console says enter two numbers to get the sum. So the user knows what the program is expecting. Now we can enter 15 and 10, and we get the two numbers. But our program doesn't do anything more, okay? Because we just coded the inputs. Now what we want to do is get the sum of them, and we do that by using the sum operator, the plus operator, and we do number 1 plus number 2, and of course we have to output that result, otherwise this doesn't do anything, because we compute it but we don't show it to the user. To do that, we can do console write line, and we can say the result of the sum, or just the result. The result is we can do this several ways and put it on the same line, but just for the sake of simplicity for now, we will do it this way. And if we run our program now, it will ask the user to enter two numbers. I enter 15 and 10, and then it says the result is 25. We have our first program making the sum of two numbers working. That's very good. If this is really your first program, I remember feeling very excited when I made my first lines that had some inputs and an arithmetic operation. Consider subscribing to get more tutorials like this one and keep advancing in your code journey. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's move to the next one. Ctrl-K, Ctrl-C, comment out this one, and go to print advice on clothing depending on temperature input by user. What do we want in here? Just for sake of simplicity, we are going to be working with temperature that are integers and not floats, not decimal, right? So just integer numbers. Let's say temp will be, remember we have to use Convert.ToInt 32 console.readLine. So first we will ask the user to input the temperature. So let's do that, otherwise the user won't know what to do. Enter current temperature. And then we will start working with conditionals. Remember, in the first video about programming fundamentals, we talked about the if sentence. Evaluates a condition and then takes one path or the other. In this case, we will do a very simple conditional sentence in here that will be if the temperature is greater than 25, this is assuming Celsius, this is greater than 25, then console write line put on a shirt. And else, if the temperature is below 25, then we will say console.writeLine put on a jacket, it is freezing outside. 25 is a little bit too high. Let's put, I don't know, 12. That makes more sense. What this program should do, what is happening here is, first we will output to the console a message saying to the user what is expected from him or her, okay? Then we will read the input, convert it to integer, and put it in our variable temperature. And with that value, we are going to evaluate if it is, remember the algorithm, doing the if sentence and having two paths, okay? In here, when we are drawing this, we will put the condition in here, and that will be greater than 12. And that will be the temperature. Greater than 12, then if yes, or if true, because it is a Boolean condition, if true, we will do this, the console write line put on a shirt, and if it is false, we will do the put on a jacket, okay? So this is a very simple algorithm, but it starts making sense. We have inputs and outputs with the console and the user, and we already have a variable, and we have our first if-else conditional sentence. I hope that makes sense. If we run this program, it will say enter current temperature, and we will put, I don't know, 22, and it will say put on a shirt. Nothing fancy, but it works. Looks like it works. Let's try it one more time, and it says enter current temperature, we put 10, and it says put on a jacket, it is freezing outside. It is working. So that is a nice example. Feel free to try different values, different conditions, and see what happens in your program when you play with these inputs and the conditional statement. Let's move to the next example. That will be print on console. Oh, this is great. I just got a very viral tweet about this. Print on console if the entered number is even. We are going to start working with even and odd numbers, okay? And for that, we will see an operator that will be very handy. Okay, so first things first. What do we want to do? We want to, I will just copy this from above, but we want to output a message to the user saying what are we expecting from them. In this case, it will be enter a number, whatever, the user can enter any number that he wants, and then we will be putting this number into number input, so we have already our number. And now we want to do an if, okay? If some condition that we are going to see in a minute, we will console write, I don't think I have defined this, let's put it's an even number, just to give report to the user, and then in the else console.writeLine it's an odd number. Okay, hope that makes sense. So the key of this algorithm is what goes inside of the condition. How do we determine if a number is even or odd? The way to do that is by checking the remainder of a division by 2. If we have a number, let's say 3, and we divide it by 2, then the remainder will be 1, okay? And of course, this will be 1. This remainder says that this number, 3, is an odd number. If we do this with 4, for example, divided by 2, this will have a 0 remainder and a 2 in here. Because the remainder is 0, then it is an even number, okay? You probably already knew that, but in case you forgot, that's the way we are going to be computing if this is an even number or an odd number. To do that, we have an operator in C# and in most languages, and that will be the percentage operator. So what we have to do is number input remainder with 2. That will give us the remainder of doing the division between number input and 2. The problem is this gives a number, okay? Let's go one more time with our example. This returns us this number, okay, the remainder. And we want to check if this number is 0 or it is 1. We want to do an if, because that's what we are doing in here, okay? We want to complete this condition. So we cannot just put this operation in here because that will return a number. We need to convert this into a Boolean result. So it can be false or it can be true. To do that, what we have to do is check if this result is 0 or 1. So if this result is equals to 0, then it is an even number. And if it is different than 0, then it is an odd number. If this is kind of confusing, you can add some braces, so this makes a little bit more sense, okay? Number input, reminder with 2, equals 0, that is an even number, otherwise it is an odd number. Let's run it and see what happens. The program says enter a number, for example we put 40, and it will say it is an even number. Okay, that makes sense. Let's run it again. Enter a number, 15, it is an odd number. I think our program is working. Let's try a couple more. It is an odd number, and if we run and put 8, it will say it is an even number. We have a program that correctly outputs if the number given by the user is even or odd. Let's comment this out and move to the next one. Now we are going to be touching bases with functions and procedures. I will give you some theory, very quick and concise. What we are going to do is start encapsulating portions of code. The problem we have with all the code that we have been doing so far is that we always write one below the other. Imagine if instead of only having these 5 lines that requires an input, saves it, and do one if, we have like 10 if, or 20 if, or a lot of arithmetic operations, or we have to ask the user for 5 variables. Then the code starts being very large, and it becomes monolithic and more difficult to track, to read, to maintain, and it becomes a mess, basically. So the way to avoid that is to start encapsulating portions of code that have a meaning together. For example, this right here, let's uncomment it with Ctrl-K, Ctrl-U, this if with the number input variable and the console write line could be a print if number is even or something like that. That's what the code does. The code prints if a number is even or if a number is odd. So we can group together these 5 or 6 lines and put it like in a tiny box that has a name and do something. It's very important that the name is clear and represents what it does, because the user, the programmer that uses the function or the procedure will consume it usually from the signature. That will be the name and the parameters, but not necessarily has access to the code, to the implementation. So it is very important that the name you pick for your function is representative of what it does. We will not be using this for the example, so that's an idea of why do we need functions and procedures. Let's move to the difference between those two. A function returns a value. A function has an input, then it has the code, the process of the function, and has an output. It converts something, okay? This is very mathematical. You have an input, a function, and an output. The difference with a procedure is that a procedure does not output anything. A procedure takes inputs and do something. This is like a process or something like that. You can imagine a tiny portion of codes that do something but does not return a result, does not transform the input. So an example of that could be, let's say we want to give an introduction to the user and we do console.writeLine and we say welcome to our great program, our great app. Let's start using more modern names. And then we have another one that says the instructions to start, and it will say please enter your name. Please enter your name. If we have this, then we can encapsulate this into a procedure that says print welcome. Imagine that. We can do print welcome. And that makes much more sense, right? I will just for now do this. I will show you how to write all this in a second. We can do something like this. This is a procedure. So it is a tiny piece of code that does something. So it has a name. This is the signature, the name and the parameters and the accessors. It has a name and we can reference it in our code and it will execute whatever is inside the procedure. So in this case, when our program says print welcome, the code will go inside the definition of print welcome and do all the steps it has inside. Okay? Let's try it and see what happens. The program ran and hit the print welcome, went into the definition and wrote into the console, welcome to our great app, please enter your name, and stop there. So how do we write this procedure and functions? For now, we are not going to be focusing on all these accessors, all this stuff like private, static. For now, just trust me and use private and static at the start, because that will make everything work in this current environment. We will touch into this when we get into object-oriented programming and classes and so on. What is very important is the third word. The third word is indicating what this method returns. If this method returns something, we said it was a function, okay? So let's create our function isEven. We just talked about the logic of isEven. So our function isEven has to return a boolean, okay? A bool. A bool is true or false, remember? That is the values that we put inside our if sentence to see if something is true or false. Let's call our function isEven. It will take a parameter that will be the number, and it will return if it is even or if it is not even or odd. Okay? So what does this function do? Let's draw a little. Our function isEven. I have very bad calligraphy, sorry everyone. I know probably your eyes will be bleeding right now. So our function isEven has a number as an input, do some logic that we don't know, and then returns a boolean saying true or false. Okay? I hope that makes sense. And the logic we have to return is this one. But how do we return it? Well, that's pretty intuitive, with the keyword return. And of course, we have to use the number because that's the way we call it as a parameter. So how do we understand this function? This is the third word. Remember, private and static, just use it like that for now. I will later on explain why we need that. The third word is the type that the block of code returns. In this case, for this function, it will be a boolean. In this other case, for this procedure, the procedure does not return anything, so we put void. Void means does not return anything. Then we have the name of our method isEven, and then we have between braces all the parameters, all the inputs that the block of code needs to function properly. In this case, we only need one parameter, and parameters are defined as variables. We have a type, and a name. As easy as that. It is the same way that we define variables, we define parameters. A type and a name. In this case, it is an integer, and the name is number. Okay? Then inside curly braces, we have all the logic for our function isEven, that is returning number reminder 2 equals 0. Okay? So this will return if a number is even or not. And now we can uncomment this isEven of number inputs. Okay, see, that is much more readable. we still didn't encapsulate a lot. It is only one line of code, and that was the meme that went viral the other day on Twitter. But it makes sense, okay? Instead of having this logic in here, it is much more readable to say, okay, if number input is even, then I will write line it is even. If not, I will write it is odd number. We could make this a procedure instead of having a function returning is even. We can take it one step further and make a procedure that will be private static void, because it is a procedure, it doesn't return anything, void print if number is even, print number is even or odd, and we'll receive an input, as an input, a number. And what will this procedure do? Well, it will do all this. I hope this makes sense. What we are doing is encapsulating the whole logic of checking if a number is even and writing into the console the result of the check. So now, in our program, we can just do a write line, enter a number, ask for the number, and then pass it to our procedure print number is even or odd. And it will do all the logic inside. For the user that is creating this, it is much easier to write, because he does not care and does not have to know what the implementation is for is even or odd, or even how it is being printed out into the console. We just say, you have a function in here, or you have a procedure in here that receives a number and prints out if it is even or odd. Of course, in this scenario, we are the ones that coded this method and this function, so it doesn't make much more sense other than adding readability and making our code more compact. But we could be writing these functions and procedures for other people to use later on, or ourselves in other places. So that's why it makes sense to start encapsulating code, to have more clear names, to hide the way something is done, because we don't care about the details when we are using it, and to make our code that uses this more compact. If we run this, we will expect that it will work the same way as before, right? Because the logic never changed. We just move pieces of code from one place to another. So
you, the one that is enjoying this tutorial, don't forget to smash the like button.
Enter a number, we enter 15, and it still says it is another number. Okay? That was a lot. This is not a very easy topic. Understanding functions, procedures, and how to write them and encapsulate code, it takes time, so don't feel overwhelmed if this was a lot. Try to revisit the topic and do different examples. It will help you to make the knowledge your own. That's about it for this video. I would like to leave you with an exercise so you can practice your new skills. And the exercise will be the following. Given two numbers by the user, print out the product of them if both are even. Then that's one scenario. Else, print out the sum of them if both are odd. And otherwise, print out the greater number. Okay? I will give you just one hint in here, and that is you can concatenate the if sentence. Imagine this. You can do if a condition, do something else, and then you can put another if inside. If another condition, do something, and else, do another thing. What we are doing in here is have false. You will need this to solve the exercise. And my idea is that you have to think and even search in Google or ask a friend, or you can ask myself if you want here in the comments or in Twitter, and I will help you. But I don't want to give you very easy exercises that are very similar to what we already did, because otherwise you wouldn't be having that experience of having to learn new things by searching yourself. And that is a very valuable skill as a developer. You having to go to Google and search for something and read a lot of code and watch a video, that will help you a lot. So that's why I am a true believer of giving hard exercise that build on top of what you already learned on this class, on this video. Okay, so keep in mind you will have to concatenate if, and then you will have to also use the isEven function that we learned today. That will be all for today's video. I hope you like it and learn a couple of things about if and else statements, how to control the flow of your algorithm and programs, and how we can encapsulate pieces of code using functions or procedures. I will see you in the next one.